I said New North Carolina, Tennessee and Georgia are disaster zones after Helene, and Biden said he's not going to send any more help. And what's the solution for a low birth rate? What do you think? Of course, more immigration, and maybe just raise taxes too, because that's what they do with everything. Unfortunately. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. Starting at the food professor. And he says, Bill C-293 is arguably the most concerning legislation I've seen in 25 years. Under the guise of pandemic preparedness, it grants the government excessive power to potentially reduce meat consumption in favor of promoting plant-based diets. Between 293 and C-63, the overreaching federal government needs to be brought to heel by the citizens. And that's us. Like, we need to say absolutely not. So I'm glad to see prominent people saying absolutely not. This is not going to happen. This is not okay. So I'm glad. And David shares the food professor's interaction with his guest, talking about how dangerous this is. So it is, and people are going to be impacted in a negative way by this. How much will Canada tolerate? And they do it so little, so small, that we tolerate all of it because not enough people either are aware or rise up enough or care. And so they just continue adding on bad policies on top of bad policies, taxes on taxes, and so on. And then we get awful, awful policies that kill our productivity. And that's where we're at now. Mark is sharing this. Kirk says, every day young people are crying out how they can't find a job, can't contribute, and can't build a life in Canada. That's why more of them are leaning towards voting Conservative. So this is from Reddit, our Calgary. I'm currently a high school student trying to look for a part-time job. I've been applying online and in person since the start of the year. I've applied in every way possible, like through main websites, Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, even through email. I've also passed at least 80 resumes in person. I've applied to fast food, grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, Stampede, seriously, everything. And I haven't even gotten one call back from anyone, only rejections. I'm losing hope. And Transitional Drive says, they told me to apply for Screamfest when I showed up for the interview. There were 100 plus teenagers showing up just for a cashier position. So there's what's going on, the policies that they're enacting, and this maybe should be in the invasion part, but the policies that they're enacting are having a really big impact on certain demographics, and it's not good. It's not a positive thing. People aren't looking around and saying, it's wonderful that we're immigrating, that we're bringing a whole bunch of people from different countries, and that my kids can't find a job. Like, nobody's saying that. So again, it's interesting to me to see the polls where the Liberals are still so strong, where the NDP are still so strong. I saw the Liberals yesterday with 63 seats. Who the heck's voting for this nonsense? It's insane. Oh, all the people they're importing. Right, forgot. Quick Dick McDick is responding to Karina Gould's video yesterday talking, well, I'll just give you a quick refresh.
Something else happened this week in Parliament that Canadians across this country should be extremely alarmed about. The Conservatives put forward a motion that would trample the charter-protected rights of Canadians. Look,
did she use the word trample on purpose? Like, that's inside ball there, but wow, right? Like, because the Liberals trampled the trucker protesters with horses, right? Holy smoke, trample. Anyway, Quick Dick McDick says, I can't remember who trampled protesters with horses and froze their citizens' bank accounts. Who was that again? The whole push of the video was that the Conservatives are going to remove your charter rights and do something that you're not going to agree with. And Quick Dick McDick says, I can't remember who trampled the protesters. Yeah, that was the Liberals. Andrew Scheer is taking homage with Karina Gould's reimagining of history as well. He says the video is full of lies and needs several community notes. First, the motion doesn't direct the RCMP to do anything. It directs the government to hand over documents regarding a massive corruption scandal to the RCMP. It will be up to the RCMP as to whether criminal charges are warranted. I'm not sure I trust the RCMP. Was Scheer paying attention during the Brenda Lucki scandal? Like, by Brenda Lucki scandal, I mean the whole tenure of Brenda Lucki. Two, the motion is to hand over government documents. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Charter of Rights of Canadians. Third, no mention in this video of the actual scandal. Officials have called the sponsorship level of kind of corruption. Liberal connected directors funnel taxpayer money to companies they own. Trudeau appointed chair found guilty of breaking ethics laws. Call in the cops and the corruption. Fire Trudeau. I'm surprised there's not a bring it home. Like, crazy. But yeah, it is Karina Gould trying to fearmonger about the Conservatives doing exactly what the Liberals did, trample over your bill of or your charter rights. The Liberals did that, and the Liberals are fearmongering about the other party doing that while covering up their own wrongdoings, right? And trying to distract from having to hand over the documents that they either handed over redacted or just won't hand over, right? And like, that's not, again, it's not good, because like, they came to power claiming to bring transparency to the office. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Michael Barrett as well is weighing in on this. He says this level of corruption is comparable to the sponsorship scandal. The Liberals are so desperate to avoid accountability that they're attempting to convince Canadians that an investigation is somehow frightening and undemocratic. Why are they so afraid of an RCMP investigation? And I say again, I would want an independent, something outside of the RCMP, because they've been seen to be either completely incompetent or completely corrupt. Not sure. And point to Nova Scotia, point to what's going on in Alberta. There's all sorts of concerning things going on with Canadian police forces. Rex Glacier points this out. CBC Watcher highlights this piece. Bob Rae was asked about the death of one of the leaders of Hezbollah, and I guess like the things that stick out to me about this interview, this is Bob Rae. You see that flag behind him there? That's the United Nations flag, right? Isn't that weird? Or is that like the NATO flag? So I don't know. And like there's the Canadian flag on the other side. I think that's the Canadian flag. But it's really weird to have that NATO flag so prominent. United Nations, NATO. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm gonna look that up while him and Rosemary are talking. The other thing that I found strange about this interview is how much he seems to like the dead leader of the Hezbollah guy. Here we go.
Ambassador Rae, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Rosemary. Good to see you too.
Want to start obviously by asking you about the killing of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah and how significant you think that is for what is happening in the region.
Oh, I think it's huge. I mean, Nasrallah was an extraordinarily influential figure in the whole region, in the whole of the Middle East. He was a very powerful speaker, and a good friend of mine who's an Arab speaker said, "You need to understand that Nasrallah's voice was every bit as powerful as Gamal Nasser's voice used to be on the radio back many decades ago. So he had an ability to mobilize the Arab street in a way that very few other speakers did have. So his killing is extremely significant. We'll see what impact it has. From a practical point of view, I think it's not just his killing, but the fact that many other Hezbollah leaders have been killed, plus all the events of the last 2 weeks, have really been a huge setback for Hezbollah and for Iran and for Hamas. I mean, I think this, from a military perspective, things have changed quite significantly in the immediate term. What it means for the long term is another subject.
So, I mean, it's interesting. And I mean, he's talking about the pagers that were exploding, the scooters that were exploding, the upper echelon of Hezbollah. And I think it's just the leaders of Hezbollah who were really targeted with that attack, that having an impact, plus this influential news host, et cetera. It just seems weird to me. And I checked while they were talking, and it's the United Nations flag. So is that weird, or is that, I mean, he's the ambassador to the United Nations. So there you go. But there you go. Bob Rae talking about what's going on in the Middle East. Tom Quiggin says, believe it or not, Canada is sending $10 million to Lebanon. The statement from the government of Canada includes the following. This funding will help provide food, water, emergency health care, including sexual and reproductive health care, protection services, and other life-saving assistance. So we're sending $10 million to Lebanon. Weird, right? There you go. Yay. I mean, we've got money to splash around. Make it rain. right? That's what we're doing. Fun. Moving on, let's talk about free speech. Free speech is under attack. They're attacking free speech while they're also attacking the food supply. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that degraded nutrition makes a population easier to control. They don't demand as much. I digress. Here's Lion Advocacy. He says, as a Canadian, I'm embarrassed and ashamed that the Governor General of Canada has turned off comments to her Twitter or X posts, but that the Supreme Leader of Iran has left comments open on his posts. I have no coherent explanation as to how this can be rationalized. Lion Advocacy continues, now I'm not making this up. See attached. And of course, because this is Canada 2024 and our speech laws have been seriously transformed, I have to be explicitly clear that reposting this image is not an endorsement of its contents. So there's the leader of Iran, and it says the Palestine resistance is the victor, Hezbollah is the victor, and he's got 1.5 thousand comments on his statement. So like, the leader of Iran can have his citizens comment on his post. I think that the longer I think about it, the more I think that we're under occupation, like that we live in an occupied situation where the leaders don't work for the citizens, they work for somebody else, and they're administering the citizens on behalf of that other entity. And that's how I think it's working. Because like you wouldn't do if it was your citizens, then if it was your citizens, then you would have to. Same in the United States. John Kerry, I showed you this clip yesterday talking about how the First Amendment stands as a block to their ability to be able to hammer disinformation out of existence. And what they need is to win the right to govern, and then hopefully they can change it, right? Like, oof, that's not what people who are governing their own citizens. I think what I was going to say is you wouldn't do that if it was your citizens who you had to take care of. You know what I mean? Like a king has a certain responsibility, and like a king is maybe a bad example, but I'm trying to think of examples through history where like the head of the household has a responsibility to his family not to be tyrannical, similar to the mayor of a city has a responsibility to his citizens not to be tyrannical. And if he's tyrannical, using the tax dollars for, funding Black heritage foundations or specific businesses to the exclusion of other funding for other interests, et cetera, et cetera. When they get tyrannical, using tax dollars, wasting tax dollars, usually what happens is people get upset and they get removed, right? And so like when you scale up provincially, if the premier is not acting in the best interest of the citizens, usually people rise up. But we're in that situation and nobody understands how to take back control. And I think that it's been normalized. I think that the situation of you do what we say because we said it, and we said it because, you have to trust us because we're in this position of power. And so people just don't know how to either say no or what the mechanism is to remove these people. And they like it that way. And so we're kind of in a catch-22, maybe. But Elon Musk is responding to the First Amendment being the block to hammering disinformation. And he says, this is crazy. Yeah. James says, the biggest change in my lifetime is that within a decade, purely because Donald Trump won the presidency, support for free speech went from universally accepted as a core democratic value to being a fringe far-right position. Wild. Don't you think that's crazy? I think it's spot on. Like, he's exactly right. And holy smoke. Like, yeah, how dare you win, Donald Trump? How dare you, right? And here is further free speech erosion. Ads are no longer policed by the public, I guess. There's checks and balances to make sure you're not using like a trademarked character or something like that you're not allowed to use or whatever. There's certain preliminary checks. There's somebody in the newsroom or in the ad intake room that's got a checklist to make sure the ad complies with whatever regulations they've got, right? And here they're adding a new one in Toronto. Fossil fuel ads on the TTC will now face pre-screening. Similar rules could be coming for all city property. So that's pretty interesting. Some fossil fuel advocate advertising will now be pre-screened by the TTC staff before it runs on vehicles, as the transit agency takes steps to ensure the group The groups are making factual claims in their messages to the public. The TTC board directed staff to review all future advertising from a pair of fossil fuel advocates to confirm the claims that they're making have been independently verified. The board has also asked staff to propose changes to current policies that would allow the city to decline fossil fuel ads if they don't align with Toronto's own climate change policy, Transform TO. So there's a political policy, and now the TTC is enforcing the political policy on advertisements. If you don't align with our new way of seeing things, I'm sorry, you can't run ads on the TTC. So what if you're a political person and you're like, I'd like to run ads on the TTC against these idiotic policies that we're doing? You would not pass muster. They would say, sorry, these go against our policies, our rules and policies. And if you watched the kitchen table talk from yesterday, we were talking about censorship, and I cannot get Spotify to return my emails. I've emailed them every day since September 5th, asking for the timestamp for when I violated their dangerous content policy. The dangerous content policy is any content that is encouraging people to harm themselves, so commit suicide or engage in damaging challenges like the Tide Pod challenge or whatever. And I don't do that. And I said, I don't do that. I said, can you supply me with the timestamp so I can watch it and understand like what I said, so I don't do that again. And they said, we're checking with the team and we'll let you know. And they said that for 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks. And then they said, your videos won't be restored. Like, stop asking us. And I said, that's not what my problem is. My problem is that you can't tell me, you can't accuse me of something. And then when I ask you for an example of what you've accused me of, stonewall me. And now they will not respond to me. If I open a chat on their support thing, the chat box closes. Like if I ask about this, I'm sure if there was a problem with like the Spotify app not loading properly, that the chat box wouldn't just end. But if I say, what's going on with that ticket that I have open, they just close the chat and like I get booted. So it's all terms and conditions. And if they can change if they can have advertising eliminate competing opposition ideas at the advertising level because it doesn't comply with terms of service, that's a very sinister, insidious form of censorship. And it's happening right now. It's worse than Faith Goldie. Like when Faith Goldie was trying to run for mayor, there are rules that say that if you're Bell Media and you offer an ad package to one candidate, you have to offer the ad package to all the candidates. But Bell Media said, if we run Faith Goldie's ads, that's going to damage our credibility, so we're not going to run them. And then nobody said boo about it, and Faith Goldie lost. And so like that's censorship too. Different level, and this is worse. This is worse. Let's move on. CBC Watcher is highlighting this. CBC is talking about climate change, but the context is in what CBC Watcher says. So he says, turning off comments on a climate change story is proof that CBC has taken definitive side on the issue. They are no longer a news service, but an activist advocacy group funded with Canadian tax dollars. So again, if a majority of people or whoever wanted to have an article that said this climate change thing is a hoax used to steal our tax dollars, which it is, that wouldn't run. CBC would say, oh, that goes against our terms and conditions. You can't run a story like that. That's fake news. That's false. That's misinformation. But it's not misinformation. The idea that the climate is changing is injected by the government, by media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They say there's consensus by these scientists, so on and so forth. And I'm not trying to like debunk climate change at this point in time. We could have a whole other video about that. But fundamentally, when CBC refuses to present the other side, they're no longer being impartial, balanced, and informing people. They're just whipping up a frenzy of support for the bad government policies that are causing problems, right? And yeah, it's fake. CBC News says the growing threat of climate change is causing the price of coffee beans to soar, and the market watchers say that increase will soon trickle down to consumers. Oh no, your coffee is under threat, everyone. They're going to disrupt markets, claim it's climate change, and that's going to be proof. That's proof for sure, 100% proof that climate change is happening. Can't you see the price of coffee? It's as real as it could be, right? It's hitting you in the grocery store, in your wallet directly. But it's manufactured. They've been trying to disrupt all sorts of food supply chains and it's been sending have you seen the price of ham for Thanksgiving? And the turkeys are pretty okay priced, but the hams are very expensive this year, and that's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better. Andy Lee is asked by Naya. This is part of a very interesting thread. Cult Montreal says hundreds of fake X accounts in Quebec are actively misinforming and intimidating the public. Pierre Poilievre was recently caught in connection with an operation involving fake accounts at the head of this that all held the same discourse. So bot accounts. And so this account, Cult Montreal, is smearing Pierre Poilievre, saying he's using bot accounts. Here's the evidence. Here's the proof. And then Terry says, where's the evidence of the claim made in this tweet? And Naya says, hey, Andy Lee, don't you have receipts on this group getting government grants? And Andy Lee says, I do. They get government grants every year. So you've got 21, 2020, you've got 22 and 23. And so each year is 12,000, 2020 was 46,000, 22 was 13,000, 23 was 13,000. So it's not a lot of money, but I mean, it's interesting that they're smearing Pierre Poilievre, tit for tat, scratch your back. You put up a tweet smearing Pierre Poilievre, right? Like, it's very, very plausible, right? So I don't believe that these people, these, who are they? Cult Montreal, are coming up with this tweet by themselves, because there's so much influence in the background of tax dollars flowing to them, right? All you have to do is post a couple of tweets, easy ozy, right? No problem. During a very specific time, like pre-election time, specifically not during election time, right? Interesting. Just very interesting to note. Pierre Poilievre has released a new commercial. Speaking of election time, new commercial from Mr. Poilievre is very election focused. Here it is.
Feels like home near the mountains where I grew up. I was adopted by school teachers who taught me that in Canada, if you worked at it, you could climb any mountain. People don't feel that way now. In fact, it feels like we're all a long way from home. Our youth can't even afford homes or food. Debt, taxes, and crime are up. Jobs are down. Immigration is broken. Woke obsessions dishonor our history, destroy our education, degrade our military, divide our people. But common sense will lead us home. We'll cap spending, axe taxes, reward work, build homes, uphold family, stop crime, secure borders, rearm our forces, restore our freedom, and unite our people with common values, common sense, common hope for our common home, Canada. Let's bring it home.
So there you go. Very hopeful, although again, like, I'm fine with hopeful. That sounds fine. I like hopeful. It's a good idea to be hopeful, right? It doesn't address any of the very material issues, like, I don't know, where are the Chinese traders? We should have people who are working for us and not for foreign entities, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of rich material for mining for Poilievre to use, and I mean, this is erring on the side of a classic election ad, and it's fine. But I feel like we could be using different kinds of rhetoric. You know what I mean? It feels like we're in a different gear than this ad is implying. I feel like things are a little bit more urgent than this ad is implying. This ad is you're cruising to an easy re-election, right? Like, I don't know. Anyway, here's the next thing. Maxime Bernier says, packed house at our public meeting in London. Canadians are fed up with empty promises and poll-tested slogans. They want to hear about concrete, real solutions. And Maxime Bernier offers those, so that's good. Lion Advocacy says, what bold-faced cowardice. Anita Anand says, and this is a push not just for Anita Anand, all of the top-line liberals are pushing this, talking about abortion and women's rights and women's health, et cetera, et cetera. But I've been very hard on these guys because I keep pushing back saying, killing babies is not women's health. That's not the same thing. Those two things are different. You guys keep conflating them, but they're different things altogether. And so it's good to see other people pushing back on this in a different way, like a different direction. The direction being pushed back by Lion Advocacy is pointing out that the government forced pregnant women to get an experimental jab. He says the minister and her government compelled pregnant women to take an experimental vaccine. The alternative was that these women be left with no job and no employment insurance. There was no choice. Yes, experimental. And he links to it. And Anita Anand is saying a woman's right to choose is non-negotiable unless you're going up against the government, of course, right? Of course. Andy Lee says, let's just grasp the gravity of this for a moment. CSIS went to the extraordinary length to surveil one of the Liberal Party's of Canada's top fundraisers, Michael Chan, prior to the 2021 election. And here's a highlight of that. In general, the use of warrant powers is not to be taken lightly. In reviewing an application to the federal court, the minister must be satisfied that the proposed warrant powers are reasonable in the circumstances. This requires diligence and careful consideration. Warrants that touch on Canadian fundamental institutions require an even higher level of consideration. Andy Lee is saying, let's all just take a moment to digest the fact that our nation's National Spy Agency obtained a warrant to plant surveillance bugs in one of the Liberal Party's top fundraising favorites, car, home office computers, and mobile phones ahead of the 2021 federal election campaign. Huh. Pretty crazy, right? I'm sure there's nothing to see here. Nothing at all to see here. Chinese traders, at least 11, maybe up to 50 more across the country, and bugs in Liberal donors' offices, and we haven't heard much about it, really. It's quite incredible. Wall Street Silver says this is just within the realm of elections and election interference and all of that stuff. He shares this meme. Every minute of every day, every computer in the world is under attack from hackers, except our voting computers. They're completely secure, and if you even question that, you're a threat to our democracy. I thought that was funny because, yeah, they've been fighting tooth and nail to protect the Maricopa County and all sorts of different voting machine situations, and nobody's allowed to get to the bottom of the 2020 election in the United States, because if you got to the bottom of that, I think you'd find a whole snake's nest of other irregularities, and if you found that, you might just fix the problem, right? You might just sort it out, right? And so they can't let that happen, so they're hoping that people forget. And Donald Trump coming back in, do you think he'll forget? Maybe. He might forget. Plumb forgotten. He is getting old. I hope he doesn't. I hope he's drains the swamp and all the rest. But I watched his first term too. Okay. Randy Hillier says, let's talk about COVID very quickly. UK COVID inquiry hears overstated is a much nicer and polite word to use rather than concise words like liar and dishonest to describe the COVID con. Yep. Very interesting. Dr. Charles says the COVID inquiry, Chris Whitty admits risks of virus were overstated. This was not a cost-free mistake. It was not a mistake. We should not let them. It's like finding a child with a green crayon all over the wall, and then you say, what happened here? And they say it was a mistake. Like, it wasn't a mistake, kid. You did the difference between a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, right? And you know that, and the kid knows that too. And then after you've taught them the difference between a mistake and what they've done, which is willful destruction of property, child. So once everybody's on the same page, it's interesting, right? Oh, costly mistake. It's whitewashing the history. It's changing the history by recasting what they did as an accident. Whoops, we didn't understand. We didn't know. It was overstated. Yeah, because you lied. Not a mistake. Moving on, talking about China, Optimum Publishing International says live Sam Cooper just named Mary Ng as an unwitting target of the CCP foreign influence operation on the Roy Green Show. She and her staff are being investigated by national security agencies. Up to 50 candidates were targeted of foreign influence ops by Iran, India, China, and more. So it's not just China, but we've had leaks from CSIS that indicate at least 11 MPs have had monetary help from China and more. And Han Dong bust in enough students to take the nomination away and to be a shoe-in candidate in a Liberal safe riding. So that's, I mean, that again is some very inside baseball. That is like, you have to know things about things to get yourself in that position, right? You'd have to be aware of what's the situation on the ground, who's your competitors are in that riding, roughly how many people you might need to win, so on and so forth. And like, that indicates a lot of penetration through and information gathering from anybody who might want that information, and a high level of understanding of what's going on in our system, right? So extrapolate that out to other ridings, and how big of a problem do we have? It seems like we have a massive problem, and nobody's taking it remotely seriously. Sam Cooper, Eva Chipik is responding to Sam Cooper. He says, a national security source told the Globe then that the delay left little time for CSIS to get the final approval for a federal judge to plant the bugs in Mr. Chan's cars, home office computers, and mobile phones before the 21 campaign. The Globe did not identify... I don't have all of it. The Globe did not identify the source because they risked persecution under the Security of Information Act. Mr. Blair has denied that his office delayed approving the warrant. He told the inquiry in April that he signed the Chan warrant some 3 hours after it landed on his desk. So he signed it quickly. But Eva Chipik says, at this point, how does anyone trust anything the Liberal government says? And how desperate are the opposition parties to have to cling to this train wreck of a party? What a sad state of affairs in Canada. The opposition parties, what she means by how desperate are the opposition parties to cling to this? The opposition parties, meaning the NDP and the Bloc to a lesser extent, but the NDP mainly, I guess, in my opinion, don't have any money and don't have a popular leader and don't have much of a platform to run on. And so they're kind of screwed. And if there's an election called soon, and there is going to be an election called soon, then the NDP are behind the eight ball. They might even have to take loans out in order to pretend like they're a real party through the next cycle, right? Or maybe be absorbed by the Liberals, but we'll see about that, because that doesn't give the Liberals as much flexibility, right? But very interesting what's going on with that. Sad state of affairs in Canada. Yeah, when the NDP is indistinguishable from the Liberals and they can't do anything at all but make the Liberals more communist. Weird. The Bucky Will says, since nobody will name the names, I'll start a list. Prove me wrong. So this is his speculative list of top names that he would say are among the 11 Chinese traitors. And the short list for him is Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, Jagmeet Singh, Anita Anand, Ahmed Hassan, Melanie Joly, Francois Philippe Champagne, Dominic LeBlanc, Harjit Sajjan, Arif Varini, Steve McKinnon, Steve Galbo, Mary Ng, and Catherine McKenna. I would say that's that's an interesting list. At this point, without knowing for certain, all of the MPs in Toronto certainly are a suspect. But then broader, there's 50 more across the whole country. So it's kind of a Schrodinger's cat situation. I'm getting that wrong. Schrodinger's cat, where the cat is both alive and dead at the same time. They're guilty and not guilty all at the same time. And what does unwittingly mean, right? Like, I don't know where all this money came from, right? Somebody called and asked for my Bitcoin address, and I gave them my Bitcoin address, and all of a sudden I just had all this money, right? Somebody left a package of money on my front campaign stoop doorstep, right? And it was packaged up with cheese. So, I don't know where the money came from. Yeah, no, unwitting. I don't know. It seems unlikely, but unwitting. I didn't know they were Chinese spies. They just seemed really nice. Who was that guy who was banging Fang Fang? Eric Solwell, right? She seemed real nice. John. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful